Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the world-famous show wherein I interview esports celebrities and friends called Dinner With, while we sit down over a meal. It's more like lunchtime right now, Raz.
Yes, it is.
But we're going to pretend it's dinner.
Okay.
With these really nice open windows behind us. Anyway, so today, of course, I am joined by none other than Raz to talk about stuff. And you, as always, the show's sponsored by Grubhub, and we let our guests choose a type of food for us to dive into. And what did you choose, Raz?
I chose bidena, or some would call it injera, which is cultural food in Ethiopia. The place that we got it from is Amharic, but there are different ethnic groups within the country. I'm Oromo, so we call it bidena. The beauty of this is that sponge bread, you can put anything you want. If you're a vegetarian, you could put vegetarian food on this, plus like vegetables and everything like that. I didn't ask you, unfortunately.
If I was vegetarian, I'm not vegetarian.
Okay, good.
You've seen me eat meat on the show before, I think, because I've sent you episodes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. That's good.
I appreciate it regardless.
I remember growing up with this kind of food.
I was going to ask, yeah.
I had a lot of cultural food. Bidena was my favorite. I would sit down just like on the carpet with family and just eat it together. There was one food that I did not like, so you're lucky that I didn't choose that one. It's called khulbata, which is basically stew.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, but you can smell it from a mile away.
Yeah, that's not really my thing.
Anytime I was coming back from school or work and I would smell that just outside the house, I was like, please no.
Well,
so we got this for you.
It was pretty good. And I appreciate you letting me try this.
There we go.
It's pretty good.
Nice.
Okay, so you were eating this when you grew up. Where did you grow up, Raz?
I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So my family did a bit of a world tour. Like my dad and my mom told me about like how, they started in Ethiopia. My dad went to Somalia for a little bit. He tends to redact a little bit of that story. He doesn't say too much. He's like, I was falsely imprisoned. I was like, for what, Dad? It just doesn't. It was like, and then I went to Saudi Arabia. So he went to Saudi, and then he went to Italy for asylum, and that's where my biggest sister was born. So they lived in Italy for a year. Then they went to Canada and went to Saskatchewan, which no one knows, which is probably for the best.
Somewhere in Canada, yes.
It's the Ohio of Canada.
Yeah.
And then they settled in Calgary, so that's where I grew up from.
Gotcha. And you were there like basically for your entire child life?
Yes.
Okay, cool. When did you start getting into games?
Ooh, right? Probably like 4 years old or something like that.
Oh, okay, straight into it.
Yes, because I played a lot with my brother. I was basically my biggest brother's like punch dummy, where he just like, I was player 2, and no matter what, I was going to lose. Didn't matter what game it was. Super Mario Kart was the first game that I really got into, Super Mario Brothers type of thing like that. And then I really got into fighting games. We had Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo alongside Art of Fighting and Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis. And even though everybody else that I knew, my family was pretty broke, so like while everyone else was on the Nintendo 64 and like moving on to different games and PS2s and all that, I was like, yeah, I'm still playing this.
Well, I mean, a lot of people now go back and play those, right? Like
Yes.
They reissued all those old consoles with like built-in games and stuff, so I feel like
that's the thing.
Those are classics,
That's why I will always love those games, because yes, played on the Super Nintendo. There was also an arcade pretty like decently close to my house.
Yeah.
So I played a little bit there too. It was just something that I really enjoyed growing up with. I stopped playing for a little bit on that one, and then started playing any games that my like friends basically started getting into.
Yeah.
Which is for a while MMOs, just like RuneScape, MapleStory, anything that was free. Because I ain't not paying for games. I just did not have the money for it.
Yes.
But then I did play a little bit of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, so that was great. But then
sounds like a lot of fighting games.
A lot of fighting games.
Okay.
I really enjoyed fighting games. I would watch fighting game competitions like on YouTube and stuff, and that's what really got me. Like especially the Justin Wong Daigo moment.
Yeah.
That Evo moment was like something that I really enjoyed. I didn't play those characters. I didn't like playing Ryu or Ken or Chun-Li or any of those types. Like I still really enjoyed that and wanted to be honestly playing and watching in person at a fighting game event. So it took me some time, and I got back into it again with Street Fighter 4. So I played Street Fighter 4. I played a lot of King of Fighters. Anybody that's on my stream that sees my emotes, which is just ducks, like ducklings basically, will know that my favorite character is Duck King. Like just all of the King of Fighter games I played, which is like an evolution of Art of Fighting and all that.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'm kind of surprised I stuck with League.
Yeah, exactly. Like you did so much fighting game stuff. It's funny you didn't end up in the FGC, but kind of going back, you were playing at such a young age. I feel like a lot of people I talked to had parents that were like very sus on video games, but you were able to start playing so young. I assume yours were more friendly.
Nope. They did not like. Well, at first they liked it because like every kid's plays games.
Yeah.
But then they just always thought it was a waste of time.
Gotcha. So it was like it went from like a fun novelty toy to like once it started to become like more of a passion for you, they were worried. They
always wanted me to go out and just play with friends. So I did that, of course. Like I played basketball whenever I could. But their stipulation was always pretty consistent of study, do homework, play with your friends. Okay, we exhausted all options. Yeah, you can play games. So like that's how it always felt. But then I just kept playing more and more, and they kind of knew that they really could not stop what I was already interested in.
Yeah.
So that was like a pretty consistent form of conflict, was how much games I played growing up. Or even just like what kind of games I played growing up.
Okay, so you mentioned that you played basketball.
Yes.
Was that like the only sport you were into, or you were very into it?
I played, honestly, I only played basketball. Because I would play, okay, so there are times where I play floor hockey. Once again, like if my friends were down to play floor hockey, I'd play floor hockey.
What is floor hockey?
Well, it's like floor street hockey. Basically all it is.
No, street hockey.
Yeah,
okay.
Same thing.
Okay.
It's literally the same thing. It just depends where you're playing it.
Okay, but you're in Canada.
Yes.
So you can't be on the street because it's covered in ice.
Well,
and that would just be ice hockey. So
that would just be ice hockey.
Yes.
Yes. So like me, I can't skate. I just refuse to do anything winter sports related.
Oh, so floor hockey doesn't. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's all pretty much the same thing. You're just running basically.
I gotcha.
And so like I just play on the streets, street hockey, and that was fun. I either played goalie or goalkeeping or something like that because I enjoyed that, or I was playing with everyone else.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun with that, but mostly I played basketball, and I wanted to play on high school teams and all that. But that's when I got injured. I had a left knee injury that it was like around, it was pretty much my kneecap. So it was like it felt like a cartilage issue. I never really went to the doctor to fully sort it out. But anytime I played, it was like really active, it was like a nagging problem. So I was like, okay, I can't play.
Do you still have the issue?
Yeah.
Have you gone to the doctor yet?
No.
Could we convince you to go to the doctor to go investigate this 15-year-old issue that you've had?
You could.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like maybe when you go back to Canada next, because the healthcare system, it's maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, I'll probably do it. Well, I'm paying for healthcare here in America. I'm just not really, we can have a conversation about the American healthcare system. It's not the best.
Yes.
Even when I'm paying insurance, it doesn't even cover the things that I go there for.
Right.
So definitely.
That's why I say Canada.
Yeah, I'm going back to Canada.
It's been, how long has it been since you've had this injury? 15?
Oh
16,
my
17?
God, yeah, it's about 15 years.
Okay, yeah, so maybe it's time to see a doctor about that.
Good.
I'm glad we
good suggestion.
Figure that out in this. Okay, anyway, but you've stayed interested in sports, traditional sports for a while, because when we went out to Vegas with some friends this past summer, and you went to like spring training.
It was like summer league, summer league basketball.
Yeah.
Because I know that summer league happens in Vegas every year.
Yeah.
I did not know it was going to happen in the time we were going to go.
Yeah.
Because we only had that 1 week for a break. So I ended up just basically using the time in which we were in Vegas to just watch summer league games.
Yeah. So when did you start getting interested in, like, when did you make the jump from like fighting games to like League of Legends? And were there any? Did you play Dota? Did you play StarCraft?
I played StarCraft. It was basically in high school around 2012, when my friends were moving from game to game, and so we were playing StarCraft. They had just destroyed me in StarCraft consistently. It was the type of thing where I was learning how to play, and I built up my base. And then my friend just just built it up, and I was about to start like really traveling, seeing what's around my specific base, and then my friend would just send a Terran armada. I was like, okay, so just
Marines, Marauders,
I was like, what the hell? But then I did enjoy StarCraft a lot, and I actually watched StarCraft competitively for a little bit and was like talking about it. But then we moved to League.
Yeah.
And at first I hated the game.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
I feel like that's actually not that uncommon of a story for people.
I feel like every time I hear people talk about it, it's the same.
What got you into it? Like, friends?
Friends got me in it. It's funny because they were convincing me. They were putting so much pressure, not, kind of like the usual little, it's like, you have to play. Come on, just play with us and it'll be good,
Yeah.
And the one thing that got me was like, Summoner's Rift was so huge for me. I was like, how the hell am I supposed to keep track of everything?
Yeah.
Especially my first game, I think it was mid lane. I was like, I'm just being attacked on all fronts. I think I was just being camped in this specific game.
Yeah.
So that I didn't understand. This was before boots were unique, so I was buying multiple boots, and people were like, don't do that.
Yeah.
And it was pretty terrifying. So at that point, I was like, yeah, I hate this game. This is too much of a time sink. And then right when they were moving away from the game, I actually found love into it.
Okay.
Because Twisted Tree Line was something that I was like, solve all of that. Yes.
Rest in peace, Twisted Tree Line.
Rest in peace.
Okay. So this is in high school.
Yes.
You're playing League of Legends.
Yes.
So how much was Twisted Tree Line just a thing for a little bit, or was that like
a
your
long
main?
time?
Okay.
That was my main game. I dumped basically all my time, like early on.
Yeah.
In Twisted Tree Line. That's how I learned that. I was like, okay, which characters do I love? I love like quick speed characters that are basically nuisances, which was Nidalee at the time. AP Nidalee just chucking javelins and chunking people for half their HP. I enjoyed the concept of that. And I really enjoyed it. My friends had just moved on though. They had already gone on to the next, best thing for them. But I was like, guys, I like this game quite a bit. I'm gonna keep playing it. So that's where it kind of led.
Did you play in any did you try to do any of the little community competitive Twisted Tree Line stuff? Okay,
I didn't even hear about it. I was just vibing playing normals, and it evolved when my friends stopped playing into me finding friends that were playing it. So then I got new friends that were playing Twisted Tree Line, and then I moved into Summoner's Rift because I actually got a good handle of the game at that point.
And you're still in Canada during this time?
Yes.
So what year was this? You said 2012, so what year in college?
2012. That's a good question. I think I started when I was at the end of high school, going into college.
Yeah.
Because that was definitely, for me, the story was me playing the game after courses, during summer, during summer courses as well. And every time I was back from school, that was my way to kind of de-stress. That was my sole way of de-stressing, funny enough.
Twisted Tree Line.
Twisted Tree Line or Summoner's Rift.
Okay, so when did you start to make the jump over to Summoner's Rift?
I don't even remember. I think it was when I actually just had a group of friends to play with.
Okay.
Because I can play Twisted Tree Line alone. That's no problem by me, right? Even if I lose those games, those are still fun for me.
How painful was it for you when they killed Twisted Tree Line?
It was pretty sad. I'd completely moved away from Twisted Tree Line, and I understood the reasoning behind nixing the game mode. But I really loved it. I thought it always had place because I knew how I started playing the game. And I guess ARAM kind of took over from that point. All of my friends, if they kind of don't understand the game and all those things, they would just play ARAM. But ARAM doesn't really tell you or still give you the fear of Fog of War. It doesn't really give you an understanding of how to play, use your advantage to go in other lanes. So I felt like I learned my champion really well, that I was, going through champion and champion in that game mode. So very sad. I was very sad.
When did you start watching League Esports or become aware of it? What were those early moments like for you?
I remember starting with it started with me, okay, first I wanted to learn how to play jungle. That was my excuse. Because I was none of my friends wanted to play jungle. Any single one of them got torched when they started. So I was okay, I'm gonna play Shaco and I'm gonna learn. So I had watched Saint Vicious and Odd One stream. That was my way of learning how to path and basically fight camps.
Yeah.
And
so this is still high school?
This is still, God, I have no idea at this point.
Okay.
This is maybe,
you're watching Odd One and Saint, it's early days.
Yeah, early days for sure. And it was probably still when I was in high school or just past that. So definitely when I was watching those guys stream, I was okay, I'm learning more and more. And then I started watching MLGs. I don't know if it was MLG 2013 or something like that.
Yeah.
But those were the first tournaments I was introduced to.
Yeah. Might have been 2012 because 2013 is when LCS kicked off.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay. Then.
And so there were still MLGs in the early days of LCS.
Okay.
Because they were like integrating these third-party things. They'd have like LCS days at these events or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, then yeah, actually, so just so you know, like my frame of reference for competitive at the time.
Yeah.
There was an MLGs for sure. There was IPL 5, which is a big one. Season 2, which is like my favorite.
2012, yeah.
Yeah. So that was the era that I was watching in, and I think I was slowly already watching Chinese games as well. Okay. Chinese tournaments. Because,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Then it must have been in university because the reason why I would watch games in China was because I was either doing an assignment late at night, just like hardcore grinding a written assignment, and I just had it in front of me. And also I was taking a Mandarin course at the time in university. Okay. So it was an excuse for me to learn a little bit more.
So not to jump ahead too much, we'll get to it later, but you end up in China eventually. Was this planned? Like you were taking Mandarin, you were watching the games, like did you always have an interest at this time in China?
Not exactly. I think the reason why I took Mandarin in university was, first of all, I was like, okay, I needed credits. So like just using a secondary was one. I've always been interested in learning a different language. I learned multiple at that point, but I've always forgotten those languages. So I was like, okay, this is a good way to get into it. And I've seen some, some games in China. I was like, okay, those games look interesting to me. And maybe it would be a good way to kind of bolster my understanding of the languages by like watching more of these games and going through some of the posts. Because I was interested in going into like some of the Chinese forums as well. So I was like, okay, this is my way of learning the language as best as I possibly could. So I used it.
Okay, so help me with like the next bit of the timeline. Because you went off to college for a little bit, right?
Yes.
But you didn't finish. Or you did?
Yes, I didn't finish.
Okay, so, break down for me the going to college, how long were you there, and then what made you decide, I assume League of Legends Esports, to not finish that?
I was there for 4 years. And I think,
really?
Yeah, and that was like actually a really difficult time in my life because at this period in time, I was taking political science.
Yeah.
And I was, by the end of it, I was a year away from graduating on that. But I didn't want to complete it. This was during like a poor economic time, so I was like, I also kind of knew that finishing with political science would actually not get me a job.
Yeah.
My sister had already completed the poli-sci, gotten a degree, struggled, was actually going to come back, went back into university again in a completely different degree, going for the degree I was actually going for, which is computer science.
Gotcha, okay.
So I started hitting computer science courses, but the reason why this was a struggle for me was because I was like, first of all, what do I want to do in my life? I don't really have a clear goal set in mind. And I was always already kind of struggling because at this time, I didn't have a way to pay for the courses that I was taking. Didn't take out loans because it's another complete thing, like that was kind of frowned upon to take loans at my, just my culture and religion and all that.
Yeah.
So I didn't take a loan. Also, there was some confidence that my parents kept telling me. I was like, oh, don't worry, we have it covered.
Yeah.
And I was sus by that. I was like, I grew up all of my life in this house, and I don't think you guys can cover the cost of these courses.
Wanted to make sure you got through it?
Yes, I think they wanted to make sure, and also they were pretty just confident that they could get the money for it. And I never wanted to be too much of a burden, so even though I was kept pressing, I was like, I can still work a job. They didn't want me to do that. My mother, especially, because her upbringing was always, no, when I grew up, I just did my work. It was if I was going to go into school, I did that, and I didn't focus on anything else.
Yeah. Did you work at all in college?
After I had some problems.
Okay.
So the problems were, after a semester, I went to my parents and they couldn't pay for the semester that I had just gone through.
Gotcha.
And so I'd get calls from the university, basically sharks, of give us the money.
You owe us money, yeah.
Yes.
So you don't have to pay, I think in the US, you have to pay up front on base. There's obviously the whole loan system.
Yeah.
I think they didn't let you sit in classes until you'd paid, essentially, in the US.
Pretty much. Oh, okay, that's
at least
interesting.
For me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would have gotten to that point. But for me, when I faced that issue, thankfully they gave me an option, which was you can pay bit by bit.
Gotcha.
But you can't take another course.
Installments.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You can pay in installments. So when I had that issue, I was really upset because it felt like I had wasted time, a lot of time in my life. And so I was like, okay, I'll take a break from university to just work. So I worked basically Starbucks.
Oh, okay.
So I started working.
So basically Starbucks.
No, it was Starbucks.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked at Starbucks.
I didn't know if it was Tim Hortons.
No.
We're in Canada trying to keep up.
Yeah, Tim Hortons was the competitor across the street.
Yeah, okay.
But no, I had worked at Starbucks, and I took a semester off to just work and pay off the debt. And then so after that, I'd also taken another semester off to just kind of help family, because there's like an issue within the family in which I had to help out with their work. So I already taken off like now 2 semesters working, either helping family or trying to help myself.
Yeah.
So mentally I was pretty much spiraling, because I was like, okay, I'm kind of already stuck for a course that I don't believe in. And I'm moving to a different course, which is going to take a considerably more amount of time, because I spent all that time. Exactly. Spent all that time in political science. So I felt stuck. And I also had done so much listening and doing something that other people had wanted, like specifically my mom and dad.
Gotcha. They had said you should go to college and...
Yeah, and not work at the same time or something. So there are so many instances in my life where I felt at that point where I was kind of doing what someone else wanted, not going for something that I believed in, and making my own mistakes. That I was like, okay, like at that point I told myself to, no matter what, do what I feel like is the right decision.
Sure.
Even if it turns out to just obviously like fail in my face, right? Because I would rather fail off my own choices than to go with someone else's decision and fail. It's like, okay, then what did I learn? I didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
So that was when I came with the opportunity to go dive fully into esports.
Gotcha.
I just messed up the timeline for you now, because I didn't even talk about.
Okay, we're rebuilding it. We're rebuilding
that's
it.
fair.
Okay, so you're in college. You're trying to figure out what you want to do.
Yes.
And you're not confident about this comp sci path, and you decide that you want to do esports stuff. Now, I think I know what your first job was, but help me understand kind of what your relationship was with esports at this point in time. Because obviously, earlier on, you'd been watching games to like learn how to jungle and to get better, but you know, certainly it seems, I imagine your relationship with esports had progressed by this point in time.
Yeah, by a lot, by a lot. So there was a time in which I kind of mentioned when I was doing a lot of assignments at night, and it felt like I was more nocturnal. I was watching a lot of Chinese League of Legends, and I really enjoyed it. So much more that it was no longer a reason for me to just like learn how to play the game. It was just because I enjoyed watching these games.
Right.
So I watched a lot of those games. I watched a lot of North American games. I was already a fan of St. Vicious and Double Lift and Afromu, like all these kind of carries. There were 80 carries at the time. So I was a big fan of just like those personalities. So I just watched as many games as possible. It was my way of kind of just like, I didn't have a hobby during the winter. I couldn't play basketball during the winter. I didn't play any winter sports. And even during summer, I was like, okay, I was playing the game anyway. So I was just finding myself watching a lot of competitive games. And then in my mind, a light flickered, which was, hey, if I need at the end of my time in university references, I need to start working now.
Yes.
So for me, that was, I needed more references for, for a resume.
Yeah.
And I also just needed more experience writing, because there were times where my writing was just needed more work. So I started writing, blogs for Twitter on Chinese League of Legends, because I didn't see anyone like talking about it other than Kelsey and Frost and the people who were, and Hubo. Like there were a few people that were already in the League of Legends Chinese esports for the West.
Yeah, there was like a Western hipster group where like you were the hipsters if you liked watching Chinese League of Legends, because everybody else was always talking about EU LCS, NA LCS, and then not LCK, but
OGN Champions, OGN Champions.
Yes. And And so then suddenly there were all these people, because there's not that much content coming out of. And so you were part of that initial crew of people that were willing to like talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think eventually commentate, right?
Yeah, eventually. Because I watched a lot of games. So that meant I ended up in my blogs would write about specific players. I wrote about Flandre and King and Snake Esports at the time. And so then people valued my opinion and the research that I had done, which was enjoyable. And then I ended up, this was around when Kelsey was like having LPLEN happen, where she was like building up a Western broadcast for the Chinese games.
Was this like a pseudo bootleg?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It was like the most buttoned up bootleg stream basically of all time. And she asked me to help kind of commentate for some of the games. And I was like, sure, I've never commentated in my life, and thank God those VODs still exist, and they were horrendous. they were so bad. But I loved doing it. And I was casting with these guys. I still remember the people that I was doing it with because it was my first time, right? It was like a play-by-play named like Tasty Nubbins, which is still hilarious to me.
Yeah.
And Hubo and all that. And those were fun times, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it made me realize, I could do this a little bit more. By this time, I think I was already, because I was a pretty consistent member on Twitter, just like putting out my written posts about the leagues. I got asked to stand in for some people during China Talk, which was their podcast for the Chinese League of Legends. So I became a stand-in at first, and then I became a permanent member. In the meantime, I was volunteering for like Leaguepedia stuff, because Leaguepedia at the time, I was talking to River and working with River, needed people to kind of fill in details for the Chinese players. Yeah. I was like, I'd love to do that. So I started working with Leaguepedia.
So you became like this expert.
Yes. Yeah. And it just kind of snowballed. Because at the time, the intent was right. I was like, this is all great references. If I were to end up having a resume for a job in life past esports, like I would be good.
Sure.
Because I was doing a lot of volunteering experience. And I was like, working with some of the social, like the Leaguepedia social media, basically, what is it called? I was just like tweeting stuff on their social media and while Chinese games were happening. So like, that was a lot of fun for me, volunteering for all of that. And then I was wondering, damn, it would be fun if I started like working with teams. Mm-hmm. Like that kind of experience for me was something that would be really enjoyable.
I think for a lot of us, there's been, when you're sitting on the outside all the time, it is tempting to think like, okay, instead of like always talking about or critiquing, what if I was able to participate? Like even I've had that thought before of like, not necessarily from a game analysis point of view, but like, wow, teams could do this part of marketing so much better. They could do content so much better. They could do whatever. So I can definitely relate with the idea of just like, you're spending all this time talking about other teams and other players, and then you get to a point where you're like, what if I was able to like actually work with one of them? Yeah,
it was interesting to me because the games that I was watching, as we already talked about, no one else was, and the metas were completely different, and you would only really see it in the West when, of course, internationals happened. And those teams clashed. The way they played the game was completely different. It was this completely aggro, permanent team fighting.
Chinese aggression.
Exactly, it was the way it was coined. Yes. That's funny. So I wanted to help in some way, or like see how that experience went. So I actually started, I signed up with, I think it was Hubo, to just see if there was a position for me to come in as a volunteer analyst. Okay. Or like if it was a paid position, great. If it wasn't, I did not mind. It was a good experience for me. So I started being volunteer analyst for Team 8 at the time. Okay. Team 8? Yes.
I forgot about that.
The coach of that team was Matt G. No, it was Matt G before him. Okay. And he was a great person. So I was working with Matt, another analyst, I forget his name already, but it was me, the other volunteer analyst, Matt, and we would constantly just basically run by games. If they had a game that was coming up in a week, it was like perfect. Like I went through the level 1s, this is what they did. This is kind of like their basically going through like tendencies that a team would have. I remember there was a specific game. God, I don't remember now which team it was against, but it was a better team than ours, it felt like. That we won based off like a level 1 that we had set up. Gotcha. Felt really proud about that. And so I was like, wow, this is a great feeling. I want to see if I could do more than that, but I didn't want to push it too much. And then the volunteer analyst that I was working with, was like, hey, Raz, like, I am doing this thing with an Oceanic team called the Chiefs Esports. I'm like seeing if I can get a job there. I have a trial and I want you to come with me. I was like, okay. And his thought process at the time was, I want you to, I find it difficult to explain this concept. Could you help me out? I was like, this is your trial. If I'm coming to help you out in this trial, that feels weird. I don't think that's going to help you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, I need somebody who's good at communicating with players. So I can get this job communicating with players.
It was weird.
Communicate with players.
And that was legitimately how it came off. Yeah. So I was like, in my mind, I was like, this is weird, but at the same time, that sounds great because I want to experience how it is to communicate with players, like the ideas that I have. Because when you're working as a volunteer analyst or just an analyst in general, like you can come up with ideas, but a lot of the times, like the coach will bring that to the players. They have their own style of play that they have, so sometimes like champ select stuff that you talk about doesn't go through that way. And even just like level ones that you throw out there or just like any form of prep, it generally just comes to the players. So I was like, I would love to be able to explain those ideas to the players, to myself, like or at least have that experience.
Yeah.
So I was like, sure, why not? So we had the trial, they loved me. I thought I was helping him. I didn't think I was trying out for the spot myself.
So you staked the job.
They got both of us.
Okay.
But they were like, we'll see you next week. I was like, next week? I'm not, I'm not
working. You
were
scared to hang out.
Yes.
And they hired you. So you accidentally got this job.
Yes, accidentally. That was the funniest experience. I was like, fine, like that sounds great to me.
Yeah.
And the Chiefs Esports, they were the best team in Oceania.
Yeah.
They had legends on that team, Swiper, Swiffer, Spooks. At the time, they had Rosie as a support. And then Radier, who was like an iconic AD carry in the region.
Yeah.
So I was like, great experience.
Is this like 2014, 2015?
Yeah, so it'd have to be 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
I don't even remember exactly which year, but that was the case.
Yeah.
So I was working with them for a full split, maybe a split and a half.
Remotely, you were not.
Remotely, yes. I didn't have a passport at this time.
Yeah.
So I was just working with them for a good amount of time. It started around summer break, so I was like, I don't need to really do anything.
Sure.
And I'm just, in my back of my head, I'm like, I'm just working on my resume. So I go through the entire journey with them. By the end of the year, we had gone to IWCQ I think it was for Worlds. And we go there and we didn't end up doing too well.
Right.
But we had won the championship in Oceania. It was all pretty positive at that point. But for me, I was like, okay, I'd worked with them for a few months now. And I came to a crossroads where I was like, okay, school's gonna start up soon. I need to actually work for money at some point.
Yeah. Oh, so they were not paying you?
No, I was working volunteer for them.
Oh, the good old Esports Classic, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, in 2014...
I got a jersey out of it, I guess.
Oh, congratulations. I guess in 2014 that was more common. But yeah, it's crazy now to think about the fact of somebody doing like all this analyst coaching work and just like not getting paid.
It's definitely was like a bit of a norm at the time if you were working for it. If you were like on the amateur level / in this case, Oceania, which was a smaller region. So I was happy doing it. But at this point I was like, now I just actually need to stop what I'm doing at some point and make money. Because I already know at this point what had happened to me. I'd lost a few semesters in university. So I was like, no, I need to get back in working for money. So the options I had after sending out resumes all across the city was a bar.
Oh, so you were no longer looking even at esports stuff.
Oh, I was. Well, I wasn't. I wasn't initially because I didn't think I was going to get a spot. So a bar that was near the house, but in a Muslim family that is also pretty cultural, that is like... Brento, what are you doing?
Oh.
Yes, that is...
Bar not a popular option.
Not a popular option, but I was like, at this point, I'm just down to get money.
Okay.
Or I had actually been asked to coach for, or help be as assistant coach for Dignitas Europe.
Yes. This is when the Dignitas Raz era begins.
It started.
It's so fun because when you look up Razzleplasm, which is your old handle before you shortened it to Raz.
Oh my God.
You just find all these Dignitas pictures. I love it. Okay.
Oh God.
Okay, so Dig reaches out, you start having this conversation.
Yes.
And you coach for them.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was their assistant coach.
Okay.
The head coach at the time was Broken Shard.
Oh boy, okay.
Yeah, I know. It's not great. Not great.
We all had interesting beginnings. Okay, so you So you start coaching, but this is the European team.
Yes, this is the European team. So this was the team in Challenger Series, and their goal was, of course, to promote into the EU LCS. So I've been working with them. Dramas here and there internally, but ultimately, like, we had a really talented squad. We had Wonder on that team as our top laner. Obvious, not a lot of people know, it's like a full Danish team. We had Senkuk's mid lane, and bot lane we had Kobe, who's still playing. And Nesbeth, I remember him.
Okay. I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, how many people would be able to guess that you and Wonder worked together at some point in time in the past?
Yeah.
It was so crazy.
It was kind of a short time. I can barely remember. I remember this, like, from scrims, the one unique part was the fact that this was during lane swap meta.
Yeah.
So I was like, that was the biggest challenge for a lot of Challenger Series teams that are like fighting to get into LCS, is like, okay, so we need to really drill in lane swaps, because anytime we face like a team in the European LCS, they would just stomp us on the concepts. But it was a fun time. And it was much more doable, because the problem with working in oceanic times is, so scrim started like 1 a.m. and end at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
So my sleep schedule was horrendous. And that was another reason why I had to, at some point, stop working remotely for an oceanic team.
How long did the dig stuff go for? You said not that long?
For a little bit. So it was like a full split, probably 3 months around there.
Okay.
And so we had finally succeeded. Like, we had won the championships in the Challenger Series, and we had auto-promoted into the European LCS. And so, like, the next challenge was basically, because Dignitas has already had a team in the LCS, in the North American LCS. So they had to choose one, and the decision for me was whether I was going to stay with the team, with an org that was a question mark.
Yeah.
Or if I was going to go to North America. Broken Shard had already decided that he was going to go to North America.
Gotcha.
Like,
do you remember
who
was it bought the team?
It was Follow Esports, which turned into Splice.
Okay.
And actually, Marty was the owner.
Gotcha.
Do you remember him?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I had a few reasons why I didn't want to like take that spot in Europe, was because I hadn't really had much experience being in-person coaching, and they had wanted me to be an in-person head coach in the European team. So I was like, okay, go into the game house, be a head coach. I don't think I'm ready yet. I'd want to work a little bit more behind the scenes first, because I only really have like an analyst background and had like pretty small like experience working directly with players. So I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna take the safer choice, because I don't even know which organization is gonna pick up the team.
Yeah.
Odie had only really said that like the one team that's not gonna take it was Ninjas in Pajamas.
Yes.
And that was the only team where I was like, that's the only team that I know that is reputable, and doesn't have a spot in the LEC. And at this time, in the European LCS, like around in Europe, there were a lot of orgs that were just scumbag orgs that didn't pay coaches at times, that didn't pay players, and I didn't want to be put in that position when I was already taking a risk.
So you end up in the LCS.
Yes.
Okay. And you were coaching, or was assistant coach still?
It was assistant coach originally.
Okay.
And then I got in the house and they're like, Raz, you are now the head coach.
Congratulations on your promotion.
Oh my God. I was like, all right, fine. The one thing I was trying to avoid, which is not being a head coach, I was like, yeah, you're now the head coach.
Was this the team in Long Beach, like at the house in Long Beach, Signal Hill?
Yep.
Okay. And who was the lineup?
The lineup was, it was already decided at this point. It was like Smitty J in the top lane, European top laner, Kire in the jungle, European jungler. We had Shifter in the mid lane, and then we had Kiwi Kid and Apollo as our bot lane.
Kiwi Kid and Apollo.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so then you were the coach, and you were for that full year, right?
Yes.
Okay. How did the team do, if you can remind me?
Really poorly.
Okay.
Relegation.
How much of that was because of your coaching?
Oh, that's probably. I would say that has a little bit to do with it. Yeah, I would say so.
I mean, you had just gone from assistant coach for a remote team to now you're like head coach for this on-site team. I always have faith in your abilities, but I imagine this is a pretty big jump.
It was a big jump, and also we just had a lot of complications.
Yeah.
Because we ended up having to go to a different top laner at the time who didn't have much experience, but he was still great.
Yeah.
In fact, like, no blame on him. He was he fit in pretty damn well.
Yeah.
That was Billy Boss. And so like we had that change. Also, I could not be on stage, which was another big issue. When I first came in, classic tourist visa. And so we had a lot of issues in terms of getting an actual visa, and that was a time when LCS was clamping down.
Yeah.
So I had not been allowed for weeks to be on stage. And at first I was like, okay, that's not going to be that big of a deal. We have a lot of like, draft meetings.
Sure.
And meetings on like literally what we should be doing. But then when you're sitting on the sidelines, you're like, oh no, this is not going to plan.
Right.
So that actually became an issue. There was one game I remember where we was like, okay, perfect. We will not pick Rengar if enemy picks Lulu. And then we pick Rengar when the enemy picks Lulu. I'm like, oh,
you're
snap.
just like,
you're like, all right, well, yeah. But like in general, like this was also during relegation. So like if you came in with a completely young team, and including myself, you did not get much leeway.
Right.
You get thrusted into relegation, and you had teams in the Challenger Series that were literally built for the relegation tournament or the promotion relegation tournament. So they were like really good. And you would have issues where like maybe the bottom three LCS teams were worse than some of the top teams in Challenger Series. So like it was a bit of a trap, and so we ran into that.
So I believe after this, you end up in China, yes?
No, actually, I ended up in...
a bit of a break?
No, so I do end up working for the LPL.
Yes.
But the first stop was Australia.
Right, because
Yes.
they did the broadcast out of Australia for a while. Right?
Yes.
Yes. It was you and Frosk, and who else was a part of that?
Me, Frosk, Rusty, Fish. Spawn was already, of course, living in Australia, but he was working on the team. That was essentially the team. Pulse came in a little bit after. Dom was already there, Dom Romer, who had just come back from the LCS. So that was the squad that we had.
And as we're filming in downtown LA, we have the sirens going by of the city. But so you end up in Australia. You have that crew.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to switch from coaching to casting?
So for me, I didn't know if I wanted to continue coaching. I actually felt as though coaching was a bit of a dead end. Like if you loved coaching, perfect. Like you can continue down that path. But if you wanted to move forward and have more kind of like a heavier job experience, I guess you could move into management. But I had just had like a pretty, personally like down split.
Yeah.
I felt pretty bad about the split overall.
Ready for something new.
So I was like, okay, I'm either going to go back to university and that had deferred. So I kind of took it as a year to year. Or I'm going to try for something new. And I got the offer from Spawn to come to Australia. And I was like, that sounds like once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah.
And not often you even get the chance. And I didn't even travel much before that. Remember, I didn't have a passport until I went to LA to begin with.
Yeah.
So LA was like the first real move for me. And I was like, now you're telling me to go a continent away? Hell yeah, I'm going to take that opportunity. And a new thing in commentary, I did a little bit of it. But I was like, now I can kind of just see if this is something down my alley. So I took the jump.
How long were you in Australia for?
2 years.
And what city? Sydney?
Sydney, yeah.
Okay. How'd you like it?
I loved it.
Yeah?
It is a beautiful city. Definitely.
Have you gone back?
No. God, I wish I could. But I should. At some point, I'm going to go back to Australia. I loved it. And I should, because I did not do much. I did not leave Sydney. Really? I should have left Sydney, but I didn't.
Okay.
I was just focused on my work and didn't really do anything outside of my house. So I just stuck it in Sydney, Australia. I enjoyed it a lot. People blow up the whole alligators thing too much. You should be more afraid of the spiders, ants, flies.
Insects.
Insects in general. If you hate insects, don't go to Australia. Don't go to Australia.
And then did they move the broadcast officially to... Like LPL at some point in time made the decision they wanted it to be more of a global brand. And so they'd bring it like on site and actually start doing stuff with it.
Yeah, they wanted to work in-house with it. So this was in, we heard about it end of 2017.
Okay.
That the move was going to happen. And we had the option to stay, there was kind of an option, but they had already decided what they were going to use for OPL.
Yeah.
And I wasn't interested in the OPL. I was interested in working continuously with the LPL. So like, okay, China. And I had not been to China, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was concerned about China, mostly from the aspect of how is racism in China? So I voiced my concerns to them on that one. They're like, oh, if you're going to be here for finals, LPL finals, because we end up going there for the finals alone. We just travel there in person. So come by Shanghai for a day and like see how you like it. Sound good to me. I enjoyed it when I was there. I think it was Beijing, and then we went to Shanghai afterwards just to see the Riot China building and also just the surrounding city. I enjoyed it a lot. I was like, yeah, this sounds great to me. I would love to take that trip.
So you, in the course of 4 years, lived in 3 different countries.
Yes. Which is funny to me too, because back when I was in college or university, Americans, college, anyways.
Yeah, college.
Yeah. Back when I was in university, I felt like I was in the Truman Show, where I just basically had not left the city.
Yeah, you're in a little bubble.
Had never had any experience. All I wanted to do was really travel.
Okay.
So when I got the option to even go to Australia, I was like, that checks off the box on that.
Yeah.
And if I don't feel like I can do it, then, at least I know. But I am pretty competitive, and I know if I put my head down and start working that I can be as good as I can. So I really took that risk. So yeah, I said yes to China.
And you were there for 2 years.
Yes, another 2 years when I was living in China. The first year I was living in the French concession district.
I love that area.
It's a great area.
Tianzifang or Tianzifang?
I think so.
Yeah. It's a really cool area.
It's a really nice spot. I enjoyed it. Really pricey, but also another problem I had with it was like it didn't feel like China. It didn't feel like an authentic.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was another bubble.
Yeah.
So the last year I was there, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna move to a cheaper spot, but also a place where I feel like I can just say that I lived in China, which is more of a Chinese residential neighborhood. I kid you not, right next door to like the building next to us was a Chinese Marines barracks.
Oh, okay.
So I would hear trumpets in the morning and at night. And then also, I lived like a few floors above the community center, like Communist Community Center, which is like, I enjoyed that too. They were all really nice to me.
I imagine there were a lot of like interesting life experiences and lessons and stuff that you learned living in China for a couple years. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. And I really wanted to learn Mandarin when I was there, because after some time you're there, you're like, people are really nice to me. But I can't kind of give that back.
Yeah.
I can't really communicate. I can hit them with broken English.
Yeah, because it's not like most places in Europe, like everybody can speak English, but in China, in Shanghai,
Shanghai's pretty good for it.
Yeah.
Shanghai's pretty decent, but in general, you're gonna run into problems, especially when you're trying to get rides around and use their version of Uber.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have a lot of problems. And I was trying to also communicate to the Chinese audience by using Weibo as well. So I was like, I made a challenge for myself to just learn Mandarin as much as I could, as fast as I can. And I knew broken Mandarin. Like I felt like at that time, I was the one that knew the most amongst the casting team. Oh, excluding Clement, for obvious reasons. He's cheating, all right? He already knew the language.
Yes.
So like I felt like I knew a bit, and I was just trying to like constantly pushing myself because, hey, I viewed that I was going to be there for a longer period of time. And, I also just wanted to be able to talk to friends, the new friends that I had made.
Yeah. Why did you decide to leave the LPL?
It was a tough decision. I remember at this time I had already, because of the constant moves that I had made at this point from one place to another, that off season, you can never predict it.
Yeah.
Even though I had at that time believed that I was going to stay in China, I was also open-minded to be like, yeah, things can change. Because I also knew the LPL broadcast didn't get much viewership.
Yeah.
And even though we were tasked and constantly pushed out content to change that, we made Culture Shock, which was like a weekly show. I had a specific show called Raz Recaps that I was also pushing. And even though like there were things behind the scene that was making it harder to produce and push out that content, it was well known that we had plans to deal with that and to work past it. But that year, in off season, I was in Europe at the time because we were at Worlds, and I was still communicating to the bosses, and we were doing contract negotiations. And it felt like if I had taken that offer, that I would not have respect for myself, basically. It was a much lower offer. I also still would have been fine with it. I asked if I could also use like Chinese streaming websites or like trying to make up for that in other ways. They said no to that, but I was like,
okay.
So
yeah,
like,
it makes it rough whenever you can't really like do outside revenue type stuff.
Yeah, so I couldn't do any of that. I was like, okay, what if I had like more kind of control over content? Because at the time our biggest issue was content. And they were like, okay, no to that. I was like, okay, there's a lot. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. Yeah, there was not a lot of wiggle room. It didn't make sense. There was also, my contract was going to change considerably, so I actually could not live in China consistently. It would actually just be it was going to get complicated.
So back to teams.
So I said, yes, I'm done. And at this point, I thought, you're right, back to teams. It was either that I was going to go back and see if I was going to continue coaching because I still enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had learned so much in my time in commentary. Because also when I was in China at the time, I was a caster lead. So I was doing a lot of work with caster development, making constant weekly meetings with people.
Yes, I remember that, yeah.
So I was doing a lot internally and I felt that I had progressed as a person. So I was like, okay, I can definitely do this again if it was available. It was really late in the off season. Or I'd be fine going back to Canada, living the rest of my ice nomadic life.
Were you going to exit esports?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. So because this is not that long ago. It's basically the end of 2019, right?
Yes.
And so there's a chance that you were just going to be done with esports a couple of years ago.
Yes, and I was comfortable with the idea.
Okay.
Like I was completely
back to university?
Yes.
Okay.
Like maybe with an accelerated course, but at the time I was like, if I don't get a job here, I'm not going to sit around doing nothing.
Yeah.
At the time I wasn't even like making content. Also is going to be difficult for me in general. I guess I could, but I could do that also while I'm back in Canada. So I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to be done with it. So I'd reached out to a few teams. The one team that was still actually looking was Golden Guardians. So that's when went through the interviews, multiple interviews with them, and then I got the job for Academy.
Yeah. I really enjoyed you as the Academy coach for Golden Guardians. I felt like you just brought so much personality to that team. And then you and Arrow had like a really great kind of relationship and dynamic on social media and all that stuff. I'm happy that you're now on broadcast and all that stuff, but it was very fun having you. I felt like you brought a lot of personality to the Academy scene whenever there was just not much.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, so you're there for a year.
Yeah.
And then back to casting again.
And back to casting.
Back to broadcast, yeah.
Yeah. So the funny thing was, when I was in my last year in China, so I'm going back a little bit for this one context, LCS did make an offer.
Oh, really?
Yes. They did make an offer, and I was pursuing it a little bit. I was interested in it, but I think the issue that came up was visa related.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I feel like I vaguely recall this. And so I think was it true that people kind of knew that there was a chance that you were only going to be at Golden Guardians for a while because I think they were still trying to figure out this stuff?
I think internally that was their thought process.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was always going to be based off of how I felt with coaching.
Gotcha.
So I remember I got the news when I was in China, just finishing that little tidbit.
Yeah.
When I was in China, I got the news that it was not going to be possible. It was just before my finals broadcast. So I was like, hey, I'll take it on the chin. That's fine. We'll keep moving. And then still wanted to be in LPL. Didn't work out. I was like, fine, I'll move into something else. Go into coaching again with Golden Guardians. After the full year, I had struggled a little bit on whether I wanted to continue coaching or actually wanted to go back to LCS. I felt like internally they thought that I was going to just move to LCS, but I enjoyed coaching a lot. It is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I think everyone's going to tell you when you're working team side, it's a roller coaster whether you're doing well in scrims and succeeding in your games and you're hitting your expectations. And I think overall, we just had great players. The expectations were a little dependent on what was happening with main team.
Sure.
Which was kind of great for us, who he ended up promoting. I remember initially working with Huhi, and so he got the opportunity to promote up. We had a lot of trials, and I think Ablaze Olive ended up promoting past me when I had already left.
Sure.
So I was really happy about that, and I thought we had a lot of incredible players on that team. So I enjoyed it, but it always felt like you never had control over how you were going to feel throughout your week.
Yeah. No, everybody I know that has been a player or a coach or whatever, it's like your life existence and your happiness is entirely based off of how scrims are going, and did you win your match that week or
Yes.
whatever?
And any time that you spend, you feel like, let's just say you have off time, scrims are done, whatever, you always feel like you needed to put more effort, which is not a bad thing. That's great.
But it is a very exhausting.
Yeah. So overall, I felt exhausted, and I remember on game days, like you would feel, in the mornings there would be times where I felt sick, but it wouldn't no one knew.
Oh, like physically?
Yeah, and no one knew because I still like hit the job well.
Sure.
But
that's a lot of stress and anxiety.
yeah, and so I just felt it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
There were times where it felt amazing, but I was like, I don't want to be reliant on that.
Yeah.
So I took the LCS job mostly because of that, and also because yes, it was a considerable increase on monetarily.
Yeah, it just made sense.
And also, I asked myself, okay, would I not be coaching if I was in LCS? I was like, no, I could still do that. I would be a freelancer, so I can still help people if I wanted to help them, or if I wanted to talk about a concept on broadcast, I could do that. And I cared a lot, ultimately, about the player story. Wanted to talk about the player story if I felt like it wasn't conveyed in a way that I was happy with, which was often when I was in coaching side. You didn't like how certain players were conveyed. It's not like you should never be negative on players. That's not the issue. There are times where they were being negative on players when that wasn't true. They were just not. It just didn't they felt like there was a barrier between team side and broadcast side.
Yeah.
So I felt like I could mend that by having some semblance of control.
So I don't want to spend too much time on the past 2 years of LCS because that's where I think most people are familiar with you, and you've obviously been on a bunch of shows with me and other people during that time. But I do kind of want to just ask, what, it's crazy to me to think about the fact that just 2 or 3 years ago you thought about exiting esports completely.
Yeah.
Where is your mind at now? Do you foresee yourself working in the space for much longer?
This is probably the most confident and stable I've ever felt.
Okay, even with the time change next year.
Yes, because hilariously enough, actually.
Yeah.
Because in the past, I was always in a 1 year mentality.
Yeah.
How do I feel about casting for 1 year in Australia? Okay, let's see how that goes. Okay, I've done a year, felt good, felt like I progressed a lot. One more year, let's see how this goes. If I feel like this is a real career path. I felt more and more confident every time, but every time there was a change in scenery, when I went to China, I was like, okay, let's see how this goes, because this feels like a new journey for me. Then going into Golden Guardians, I was like, okay, 1 more year, because it always felt as though it could end at any point.
Yeah.
And I wasn't too sad about that. I always felt like, for me anyways, I felt more comfortable with the safety net. So I don't want to be in a situation where I don't have a job and I don't have any place to go to. No, I have family back home, thankfully, and I can always go back to university with a specific career in mind. And I was very critical on myself on saving money.
Yeah.
Saving money was really important to me because I grew up not having much. So if I did have something, I'm not going to be the type to splurge. I wanted to be able to save for something greater down the line. And I personally didn't think League could last for however long it did, and the career to last for however long that it did. I just thought that esports in general wasn't a lucrative career or something that was realistic.
Yeah. So then what gives you so much confidence now? You said this is the most secure you've ever felt.
Yeah, well, now I finally... So everything before that, I was an employee. I had a contract that nailed me down. This was the first time where I was a freelancer, and I got to see how that experience was. And I had already worked with League of Legends long enough to know that the game's always going to be going. And also, I kind of tiptoed into other scenes as well.
Yeah.
So I had done some hosting for Twitch Rivals, and other games. So it wasn't just tied to League of Legends, even though I still don't feel comfortable doing anything outside of League right now.
But you started to
started to dabble.
You hosted that event in Atlanta during Worlds, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a music event for Pusha T.
Yeah.
It was crazy, first of all, to even have that experience. But it's now that I've started to really dive into it, I'm I feel as confident as I've ever felt.
Yeah.
And this is the longest I have been in a singular location, because everything was 2 years in Australia, 2 years in China, and now it's been longer, a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
In LA. So I'm now finally thinking about maybe I should get a car.
Yeah. Yeah, then you wouldn't have had to Uber here today.
Not true.
Do you have a driver's license?
An expired Canadian one.
Okay.
So I'm working on that here.
Some extra stuff you'd have to get go on there. But
yes.
Either way, I mean, I just think it's really exciting to hear. So many people, including myself in the space, have done one singular thing in one singular area for their whole esports career, right?
Yes.
And like, obviously, I might have worked at some media companies. Like when I talked to Emily, she did too a little bit. But like, you literally were doing coaching for a team in Europe.
Yeah.
You've done stuff in Oceania. You've been all over. So it's like, it's just really interesting to hear from somebody who has really kind of like exemplified the global nature of League of Legends esports, right? Not to make it so grandiose, but like that is a really cool story. And I'm very happy you did not go back to Canada all those times in which you thought about going back, because I think it's been really fun to have you be a part of the scene for so long.
I appreciate that.
Is there anything that you would say to any folks who are trying to figure out what they want to do in their life, or like, you know, they're in college and it's like, what are they going to do after? I mean, it seems like you've experienced so many moments of, you know, stepping out over the ledge and trying to figure out what's going to catch you, you know?
Yeah, for me, it's about knowing, I think spending time initially to kind of get your bearings and like everything in front of you, knowing what you love doing, knowing what you don't mind doing, and knowing what you would never want to do. Just like putting that in a document. I've always done that. At the end of the year, even this year, at the end of this year, I put out in a document, kind of just checking back if I still love what I'm doing. Because if there ever comes a time where I just do not love playing the game or watching the game, then why am I doing this? And thankfully that's never happened yet. But for people that are trying to figure themselves out, I think taking a day to soul search, know what you love doing, and then just fight it, like pushing for it. Because I think a lot of a natural feeling that you have, and this is what I initially had when I was growing up, which was, oh, I want to do this, but I don't think it'll get me a job. Yeah. Which I did with political science. It's like, oh, I want to dive into politics, or I want to dive into engineering or something like this, a specific goal, but it seems like it's far away, and it also just feels like it's something that's too difficult for you. No, first of all, know that everything takes time. It's going to be a step-by-step process, and starting now is better because, hey, if you don't start now, you're not going to start the next day, the day after that, the next week, then you've done nothing. Yeah. You've not even tried to do it. You're too afraid of failing, which happens to everybody. You need to fail. You don't need to try to fail, but you need to try to succeed, or you're never going to. So for me, I feel like I have found success by identifying what I want to do, pushing for it, regardless of how hard it was going to be. For me, when I was remotely coaching for Oceania, my sleep schedule was doomed. And I wasn't making money doing it. But I still felt like it was pushing in a direction. Like I had, quote unquote networked. I had met people that enjoyed the work that I had done, valued the work that I had done, and knew that I was somebody that was good for it. And that pushed me into Dignitas and pushed me into it. I always felt like I was constantly moving to something better and better because people had recognized the work that I had put in, and how much I enjoyed doing it. So I think that's always the most important thing is definitely don't take it for granted. Definitely don't be the person where you're taking everything for free, like it's a different time now. Get paid for your work. But also, to get recognized initially, you should just push something out there so people know who you are and what you are interested in. I have made a lot of videos that suck. I've made a lot of videos that sucked. I've made content and written content that could have been written better. Kelsey helped me a lot when I was starting out with this paragraph could be better if you do this, or put in less fluff words and more context. It's like, okay, I've challenged myself to do better and better because of that. And I felt like I became a stronger individual because of that. So for people out there, just start. Even I struggle with that today. Kind of like, it would take too long to edit, or the video quality is going to be poor if I don't do that. No, just push it out, because there's going to be people that'll enjoy it, and there'll be lessons that you'll have because of it. Yeah.
Raz, thank you so much for joining me for dinner on my Dinner With show.
Thank you.
It was super great to hear your story. Wise words here at the end. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing what's in store for you in the future.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. For everyone else, thank you so much for watching this episode of Dinner With, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching that episode of Dinner With. Hopefully you really enjoyed it. We've got other episodes, including one with Emily Rand and Steve and Kobe and Broden. There's a bunch of stuff over there on the channel. Go check them out. But again, thank you so much to Grubhub for sponsoring this. Be sure to check them out. And while you're there, check out their Grubhub guarantee, where your food is delivered on time at the lowest price, or they'll make it right. And by the way, I oftentimes give people gift cards at the end of these, and I forgot to bring one to the shoot. So here's a message of me sending Raz the information that I'm going to give him one of these in the new year. So just enjoy that. It's like a fun little, we mixed it up. There you go.